Welcome you guys to a Tuesday edition of the Damage Report. I'm Jayar Jackson. How you guys doing today? I hope you're feeling good. It's a big day going. It's a big day. It's almost like reminiscent of back when Kevin McCarthy became speaker and it took him 15 votes to get there. We have votes coming for a new speaker. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. I'm watching C-SPAN like it's ESPN. Jim Jordan's got 9 votes currently. Jeffries, Democrat, has 4, 5. Others as 1. It's building. We're going to track it. You guys don't care. I do. Jack it off. Jim Jordan is hanging out here from Brett fame and his name given to him. I'm tracking. I'm very interested in it. I hope you guys are as well, because we're going to talk about that. But you know what? To make sure we go through all of these in a very smooth and professional manner, nothing all crazy and messy like I like to do. We bring in structure. We bring in professionals. David Shuster joins me today because
smooth and professional. Are you kidding me? No, we're gonna just raucous and haphazard. But Jayar, I have to say, I'm not wearing the maize and blue today.
Yeah.
Sort of going with the black, the Rebel HQ, in case people forget where I work.
Oh, for sure.
But it's good to be on with you. I mean, these are crazy times, but it's good to be on with you.
Good to see you. There's, of course, serious things we're going to go through today. Hopefully loosen up as we get on the back end here as well. But I'm not sure. I noticed the lack of Michigan colors. I don't know if you had some shame with the ass beating they put on Indiana this past week. So
I mean, look, I grew up in Bloomington, so I'm sort of, it's always kind of tough when Michigan plays Indiana, although I always root for IU in basketball and Michigan in football. And IU always stunk in football. So, look, Michigan was down 7-0 heading towards the end of the first quarter, and then they scored 52 unanswered points. They are a beast. And so, I feel like I'll just wait until we get to the playoffs, and then you'll see me rocking the maize and blue all the time.
I was this close to texting you when they were down 7-0. And then I switched away and came back, and it was too late. Damn it. Anyways, enough of the football. We're not going to talk about anything else from the past.
I got one quick story, real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Corso, when he was coach of Indiana, they were ahead of Ohio State at the end of the first quarter. He had his entire team pose next to the scoreboard, and he took their picture. This was in Bloomington, because he says, "You're never going to beat Ohio State. We got to have this picture of the time that we were ahead." So there you go.
What a great coach he was. There's a reason he's on television now. One Lee Corso. Okay, fine. We'll get to all the stuff we're going down, because we're not mentioning what happened with my team over the weekend, because no one cares. We don't need to talk about that. I mean, come on. We do have other things going on, though. Might as well start where we usually like to start. There's new developments in Donald Trump's legal proceedings. Let's go there.
They think the only way they can catch me is to stop me from speaking. They want to take away my voice. And a judge gave a gag order today. Did you hear that, on speech? Which I believe is totally unconstitutional, what she did. A judge gave a gag order. A judge doesn't like me too much. Her whole life is not liking me. But she gave a gag order. You know what a gag order is? You can't speak badly about your opponent. But what they don't understand is that I am willing to go to jail if that's what it takes for our country to win and become a democracy again.
I could not agree more. Going to jail and getting the hell out of the way and getting rid of the guy who was trying to threaten democracy might make the country back to a democracy that is trying to still continue to be. I agree, former President Trump, as he's talking about the gag order that was put on him by the judge in one of the 2,437 cases that he's fighting against now. By the way, he said this gag order on speech. Can you imagine? I guess you'd have to imagine it, because that's not actually what was happening here. The judge was overseeing this federal election interference case, though. They put a partial gag order on Trump, forbidding him from making statements about potential witnesses or disparaging comments about the prosecutors, because that's a gag order on speech, apparently, when you're running for president again. Here's some details in case you want the truth behind after the BS lies that were just told. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkin said that she would not impose restrictions on Trump's statements about Washington, D.C. and its residents, nor on statements criticizing the government or the Justice Department generally. But she imposed a restriction on all parties, including Trump, that banned them from making or reposting any statements publicly targeting the special counsel or his staff, as well as court staff members or personnel. Weird. There's more, though. Is what she said, in case you thought this was just somebody writing about it. Mr. Trump may still vigorously seek public support as a presidential candidate, debate policies and people related to that candidacy, criticize the current administration, and assert his belief that this prosecution is politically motivated. She said he can assert his belief that this prosecution is politically motivated. He can, but those critical First Amendment freedoms do not allow him to launch a pretrial smear campaign against participating government staff, their families, and foreseeable witnesses. That's what he can't do. That's what he's telling this crowd of folks. Can you believe they're not gonna let me smear people? They're not gonna let me smear court workers. They're not gonna let me smear prosecutors. They're not gonna let me dox people's families so you can show up at their houses and threaten their lives. Can you believe it? What a world. There's more. This is what else Chuck can continue to say. Mr. Trump can certainly claim he's being unfairly prosecuted, but I cannot imagine any other criminal case in which a defendant is permitted to call the prosecutor deranged or a thug, and I will not permit it here simply because the defendant is running a political campaign. His presidential candidacy does not give him carte blanche to vilify and implicitly encourage violence against public servants who are simply doing their job. One more part. She went on to say that Trump could make statements about one of his 2024 Republican rivals, former President Mike Pence, but could not speak about his role in the case. Chutkan said Trump did not have a right to launch a smear campaign against witnesses, prosecutors, and court staff members. Well, before you jump in here, because I know you have a lot to say, David, let's go to one more video here. He was speaking at a different event, and this one really, I want to make sure we had this, and I'm glad you guys had it, because he was talking about how he's going to appeal it. But think about how he builds to that point of how he's going to appeal it here.
I'll be the only politician in history that runs with a gag order where I'm not allowed to criticize people. Can you imagine this? Do you believe this? I'm not allowed to criticize people, so we'll see. We'll appeal it, and we'll see. But it's so unconstitutional. The good thing is we have so much support, it's incredible. And it just makes it even more so. Look, I'm the only guy that ever got indicted. I got indicted more than Alphonse Capone. Did anyone ever hear of Al Capone? If you looked at him the wrong way, he was seriously tough, right? Scarface, you know, they call him Scarface, had a little scar in there.
This is a presidential candidate for one of the major parties in the United States of America. This is a former president, David, and it is Al Capone comparisons. I've been indicted more times than Al effing Capone. Can you believe it? He had a little scar on his face. Maybe it's a small accident. What the hell is he talking about? And number two, that is not the flex that you think it is. So if, say, someone else rolls up and runs for president, maybe a black person, maybe a Latino, anybody walk up and say, yeah, you know, I've been indicted more times than any other presidential candidate in American history ever because of all of the evidence that continues to flow out against me, vote for me.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things jump out there. First of all, I noticed Donald Trump slurring a little bit there, and I wonder if it was maybe his denture or teeth or something is off, or maybe he's just cognitively there's something wrong there. But I think the judge's ruling here is actually very fair. The judge actually. I mean, it's a little bit tighter. The first gag order that Trump got was in his financial fraud trial in New York, in which Donald Trump retweeted a picture of the judge's clerk and said she was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend because there was a photo of the judge's clerk with Schumer or whatever. And so that judge says, no, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. You can't say any comments about me. You can't say any comments about court staff. But you can still complain about the attorney general and prosecutors. Here, the judge in Washington is a little tighter in terms of saying, well, you can criticize Jack Smith, the special counsel, but you can't criticize him specifically in terms of calling him a thug, and you can't really sort of go after the evidence per se. I still think there's some wiggle room for Donald Trump, clearly a lot more wiggle room that he has than he's signaling to his audience. If you listen to Donald Trump and think, oh my God, he can't say anything. No, he can say a lot. It's just not too much to ask somebody not to specifically target court staff or the judge or witnesses or the prosecutors personally. If Donald Trump wants to say, hey, I think if this is the best the Department of Justice can do, we're in even more trouble than we know, he's fine to say that. Mm-hmm. But when you start to target people personally, you know, I don't think it's a lot to ask.
It's the bare minimum. And a matter of fact, you shouldn't have to say this to someone who obviously has been on all kinds of legal proceedings and has a lot more coming. So the only thing now is just he's politicking. He's out there saying, can you believe what they're doing to me? Everything that is surrounding his entire political career and probably his business career too is based off of lying to people who are supporting him into thinking that what's happening isn't actually happening and that it's some unfairness. He sounds like a fifth grader. Can you believe it? What they're doing to me? I have an idea. Do things right, and you won't have to go through these problems. I remember this party that he's the head of likes to talk about personal responsibility, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, doing things the right way. Hey, if you don't like the time, maybe don't do the crime. I keep hearing these things, but for some reason it doesn't apply to this guy. Former President Donald Trump is now going after Christopher Steele's company that put together that dossier that we heard so much about back in 2016, the one that contained rumors and uncorroborated allegations about one Donald Trump. And he is on the warpath coming back for them. He's seeking damages from this company called Orbis Business Intelligence for violating British data protection laws. Details. Steele, who once ran the Russia desk for Secret Intelligence Service, which is also known as M16, was paid by Democrats to compile research that included salacious allegations that the Russians could potentially blackmail Trump for sexual activity. Trump said the dossier was fake news and a political witch hunt. The reason why you've heard that is because he said that about absolutely everything that anyone has ever accused him of and shown evidence towards. More, his lawyer is saying Trump suffered personal and reputational damage and distress because his data protection rights were violated. That's what the attorney, his name is Hugh Tomlinson, said. He also said that it contained shocking and scandalous claims about the personal conduct of President Trump and included allegations he paid bribes to Russian officials to further his business interests. Trump's case is that his personal data is egregiously inaccurate. A little bit more of the specifics of these allegations that he's refuting against. He said that he has not engaged in any perverted sexual behavior, including the hiring of prostitutes in the presidential suite of a hotel in Moscow, or taken part in sex parties in St. Petersburg, bribed Russian officials, or provided them with sufficient material to blackmail me. He also said he had not bribed, coerced, or silenced any witnesses. So he's coming for the company that was surrounded with the Christopher Steele and the dossier regarding that, which, I mean, he was still president. Maybe he felt it damaged him in those ways. This is one of those stories, David, even from the beginning when he was talking about the Steele dossier, I said it will or it won't. I guess there's times that I'm like, this story as it develops, I'm gonna kind of take a back seat on the details because it's gonna be one of those things that has so much misinformation and disinformation, it's not really gonna do anyone any good.
Yeah, to be clear, we never did see the so-called P tape, right? That might have settled it, and never mind whether we would have wanted to see something like that. I think sort of a defamation or libel case legally might be kind of challenging for Donald Trump because, I mean, Steele was tasked with trying to find out what sort of information was out there about Donald Trump, and there was a lot of rumblings and a lot of rumors, and that's the sort of stuff that he put in his dossier. That doesn't necessarily mean that it rises to the level of defamation or libel, and I think this is Donald Trump essentially, again, for political reasons, trying to remind people, oh, I was treated unfairly. I was treated unfairly by the Clinton campaign. I was treated unfairly by the Steele dossier and people who relied on that. It seems like this is all, again, about Donald Trump trying to drive a narrative to say, woe is me, I'm a victim here. I didn't do anything terrible. I didn't do anything immoral in Moscow. Really? I have a feeling Donald Trump, given his track record, probably did some stuff. But this is Donald Trump attempting to try to set himself up for 2024 by, again, claiming to be the victim, getting his supporters all riled up and reminding them that Donald Trump has been treated unfairly. Woe is me.
The guy's talking about being treated unfairly when it comes to someone accusing him of anything. But he's the same guy who, to this day, will not admit that the Central Park Five, who accused of that crime in Central Park many, many years ago, yet they're still the ones that are responsible for that crime, just because he said so. That's the basis for his legal process when it's anyone else, especially folks that he deems criminals right off the bat. It's the way he thinks. It's the way he's always approached his life and his presidency. That's why he's got this following that he's got. One last small point, though. That dossier that was put together, Orbis says they want this lawsuit thrown out because they said the report was never meant to be made public. It was published by BuzzFeed without permission of Steele or Orbis. So I guess it was something they were compiling and it wasn't supposed to be something that was presented. It was, and maybe that becomes a problem. You guys, all you guys with the legal hats, you can put that on.
Ann Wagner and Mike Rogers publicly saying they would support us, two great members who do all kinds of great work. So that was really, really big. So I feel real good about the momentum we have, and I think we're real close. So the vote's going to be tomorrow. Will you go to the floor even if you don't have 217 votes locked down? That's how our great system works, and we will go to the floor tomorrow. It's not about pressuring anybody. It's just about we got to have a speaker. You can't open the House and do the work of the American people and help our dearest and closest friend Israel if you don't have a speaker.
You had said before you want to have 217 first.
Well, I do think that's ideal. But as one of my colleagues said in the room, I don't know if there's any way to ever get that in the room. Mm-hmm. I would love that, but I think the only way to do this is the way the founders intended, is you have the vote tomorrow. We've set it for 12 o'clock, and I feel real good about it.
Will you have more than one ballot if you don't get to 217 on the first?
We're going to elect the speaker tomorrow. That's what I think is going to happen. We got to come together. We have to unify. We have to come together.
Unify. Jim Jordan then on Monday was talking about what's tomorrow is now today. They're currently voting for this new Speaker of the House since Kevin McCarthy's ass was kicked out by the Gates 8 just over a week ago. So now they're looking for a replacement. Jim Jordan finds himself in the most opportunistic position, and he's ready to unite. You know how he works. They're currently doing it now. We'll figure out what's going on. He did say he's gaining some traction and some votes from potential holdouts previously that were Republicans. I guess he's handing out some concessions, maybe he's making some agreements. They are watching that as well. But first, there's one big name that's supporting him as well, too. As of Tuesday morning, one Donald Trump was walking out of the courtroom because that's what he's going to be doing for a while to talk about what it is that Jim Jordan possesses to be the new speaker.
I think Jim will be Speaker of the House. He's a fantastic young man. He's pretty young still, and he's very strong, he has very proper opinions about our country. He loves our country. He wants to see it do well, and I think he's going to be confirmed sometime soon. As you know, many people have now supported him. 24 hours ago, they were supporting somebody else. There seems to be great unification. I think Jim Jordan will be a great speaker. I think I think he's going to have the vote soon, if not today, over the next day or two, and I think he'll end up being a great speaker.
David, Trump seems confident, but he doesn't seem confident. It could take a couple days. It's eventually going to happen. Even Jim Jordan there on Monday when Manu Raja was asking him, are you going to get those votes? Because beforehand, he didn't have the right number. But as of now, he says, we're gonna elect new speaker tomorrow. Didn't necessarily on the first vote. But after that, we'll see if the arm twisting and the threats start to kick in for more votes to come his way. Primary thoughts on this, David?
Yeah, you almost wonder if Jim Jordan is betting perhaps on the embarrassment that the Republicans feel that they're so dysfunctional that they can't elect a speaker. So at a certain point, they'll just say, okay, Jim Jordan's got the most votes of anybody in the Republican caucus, so let's just go with him and end this all. The thing that keeps jumping out to me is I like to sort of pull back a little bit. When you look at there's Donald Trump and there's Jim Jordan had more knowledge than perhaps any other member of Congress about what Donald Trump was planning to do on January the 6th. And there were a series of phone calls that they had about what Donald Trump was going to do and what the House might do in the Senate. And Jim Jordan was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee, refused to comply with the subpoenas. He just stiffed them. And this is the guy who is about to perhaps be elected Speaker of the House, the guy who perhaps did more to try to help Donald Trump subvert democracy than any other House lawmaker, Jim Jordan. Never mind the scandal at Ohio State, where Jim Jordan has denied knowing about, sexual abuse by a team doctor when he was assistant coach and all that. The scandals that hang over Jim Jordan are so repulsive. And it just, to me, it underscores the Republican Party has absolutely no shame whatsoever, no integrity, no decency.
Let's go to graphic 2, because I like what you were pointing out when it comes to one of the potential reasons that they might be looking to go his way, because as he pointed out, he's turned a couple of folks' votes in his favor. Let's go to graphic 2, because many members also want to resolve the speaker fight quickly and see Jordan as the only plausible choice, right? What you were saying. Representative Vern Buchanan from Florida said he was, quote, deeply frustrated by the way this process is played out, but would back Jordan in the interest of party unity. There's that word unity again, a little bit more. Series of members who had indicated that they would not back him switched course, including Mike Rogers, who chairs the House Armed Services Committee. Last week, Rogers told reporters that there was no action that Jordan could take that would win his support, none. But on Monday, Rogers said he would back him, citing thoughtful and productive conversations that they had had about pending legislation on military policy, spending levels, and foreign policy. Can you think of imagine a conversation where Jim Jordan has thoughtful and productive conversations with anyone? No one else can think of it, not even Britt Hume. Let's go to I think it's to you guys. Britt Hume over at Fox News, old man, established Republican. He had thoughts about who Jim Jordan is and what many other Republicans might think of him. We keep hearing this word unity. Watch.
Well, I suppose that Jordan's best asset is the world situation and the fact that this embarrassing absence of a speaker has gone on now for quite some time. He's not somebody you would ordinarily think would be a natural to be speaker. He's an insurgent, always has been. You know, he expresses that in part by the fact you see him walking around always in shirt sleeves, never with a jacket or almost never. And, you know, you see the kind of a questioner he is in the hearings that he heads as the head of the Judiciary Committee and other investigative assignments he's had. And he's very aggressive. He's smart. Very tough with people, but he's not somebody. You know, the word that comes to mind when you think about Jim Jordan is not uniter. That's just not what he's ever particularly been. He has a following, to be sure, and he's popular, you know, on the new right.
Okay, could we have a jacketless speaker, perhaps?
Translation for those conservatives over at Fox News. We don't like Jim Jordan. Nobody likes Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan is a disruptive figure in Congress. As a matter of fact, he doesn't unify anything. He hasn't been a part of any legislation that's been crafted and passed. This guy, his role is to be everything but speaker, but here we are. But Brit Hume can't say it directly, so he kind of did, though. Let's keep it real. I mentioned the potential twisting of arms and pushing back. Let's get to this really fast, because back to graphic 4. If this first vote doesn't go his way, or maybe the second or third, this is what might begin to happen. The rallying around Jordan follows a pressure campaign, really? Against Republicans who had resisted his rise, with lawmakers bracing for an even more serious application of political pressure against those who continue to resist his speakership. Jordan isn't expected to win on the first round of voting, but Republicans could feel the heat during subsequent rounds if they don't get in line. Jordan supporters also said his opponents risked being labeled as turncoats by opposing the nominee or by opening the door to some sort of agreement with Democrats, with political risks for them in 2024. Pause. They run the risk of being turncoats by opposing the nominee. There was several of those that opposed their nominee. In fact, their Speaker of the House, they weren't considered turncoats. Well, they were by some folks, but it didn't matter because Matt Gaetz had the power of enforcing whoever the hell he wanted to kick out of the speakership, he was willing to do. So this whole revisionist of not sure how this could happen, and now they're turncoats if they don't vote for Jim Jordan. Not that any of these guys are worth being in the speakership, but from Jim Jordan, then it's your turncoat. One more part about this, graphic 6. Quote, there's a huge risk that if you end up with a coalition government and you were the person who caused it, you will be excommunicated from the party and not just from Congress, is what a lawmaker that's aligned with Jordan said. The person said holdouts would feel pressure from both the Republican base and from establishment Republicans who say the House has gone too long without a speaker. What great qualifications to be speaker. Last piece of arm twisting. I thought this was the most fun, David, before you jump in here. Let's go to graphic 9. Axios' Hill reporter, Julie Grace Brufk, she pointed this out. This is what was coming from a Sean Hannity producer, written to a whole bunch of whoever Republicans could potentially be holding out. Let's go to that white part about this graphic is what they said. This was the text that was written. Stephanie from the Hannity Show with Fox News. Sources tell Hannity that Representative, whoever she's talking to, is not supporting Representative Jordan for speaker. Can you please let me know if this is accurate? And if true, Hannity would like to know why, during a war breaking out between Israel and Hamas, with the war in Ukraine, with the wide open borders, with a budget that's unfinished, why would Representative, your guy, be against Representative Jordan for speaker? Please let us know when your representative plans on opening the People's House so work can be done. Lastly, are there any conditions representative of yours will choose to work with Democrats on the process of electing a new speaker? And she gives a deadline. This is a producer for a news show, a conservative news show, not a staffer, not part of Jim Jordan's faction, not someone that works on the Hill. This is a producer for a news show. So our producers here, would they be sending letters to congressmen and saying, we heard that you're not doing what we want you to do. Why not? We need you on record so we can then smash and lambast you on air in case you don't do what we want you to do because we control you. How much sense does that make?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. And look, Sean Hannity, if he wants to be a political strategist or a political advisor or have a role in shaping the House, he should just be honest about it and say, look, I'm not part of a news organization. I'm part of a Republican organization that likes to have its thumb on the scale and shape the way the Republican Party goes. Just be honest about that. Don't claim to be some sort of entertainer who happens to work on a news channel. Just say, look, I am an advocate, an activist. And also, I'm so glad, Jayar, that you mentioned Matt Gaetz, because the hypocrisy is so rich. There was Matt Gaetz, I think yesterday, saying that he was tired of not having a Speaker of the House. Matt Gaetz was the one who overthrew McCarthy. So just after a week, I mean, it's ridiculous. ridiculous. The hypocrisy is stunning, but that is where the Republican Party is these days. And at a certain point, they're going to make a bet. What's more damaging to the GOP brand? Is it not having a speaker, or is it having a flamethrower like Jim Jordan? I think that equation, that evaluation will determine how quickly this ends.
We'll see. I don't have good feelings about any of this, no matter how long it takes. We'll see. I do have good feelings about you guys talking to me in a couple minutes, actually for a couple minutes in about 10 seconds, because we got comments from you guys. But also when we get back, Mike Lindell is back in more trouble because he doesn't know what to do with himself. Also, Ted Cruz is looking up after visits with other folks and realizing that there's someone hot on his trail. I don't have much faith in that either, but I like to hope a little bit. We'll do that a lot more in a second after we talk to you. Hi. What's going on? I mean, I don't think they don't mute my mics in, so I could say something really offensive and curse and all I want, and you guys might hear it. We'll keep that to a minimum. Let's jump to this next story, guys. I promise you guys some Mike Lindell. I give you Mike Lindell. So let's have some fun. Let's go here.
So yeah, there's an invite out to Jimmy Kimmel for the telethon on August 28th, and I don't know. We just have him on, and I think I'd have him on just for if you want to, Brandon, if you want to be we could both come on, and you could be like the host and ask us both questions. What we thought of the claw night, and
I could talk about how your relationship has developed over the years.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Mike Lindell looks like he lives in a big house, at least in that set he's in, or whatever hell he's setting up from at the front door. There's got to be a room somewhere in that house where he doesn't have to stand at the front opening of the door next to the damn stairs. Whatever. We have to put together sets, so I notice these things. There's Mike Lindell talking about a telethon. He wants to he's inviting Jimmy Kimmel. This is going to be a big deal. Is he raising money for children? Is he raising money for families that are being murdered over in this conflict in the Middle East? What is he raising money for? It's Mike Lindell, so it's obvious that he's raising money for himself and to waste it on more nonsense things. So he did tweet out that clip. Could be a joke because there's no confirmation that this fundraiser or telethon is actually going to happen. And if you guys remember his, there wasn't a telethon necessarily, but it was definitely it was a symposium is what he called it, on proving what was going on with the election in 2020, how much of a big takeaway and fraud it was. We got to find our answers. Answers were not found. In fact, embarrassment ensued. So if he's going to have a telethon, I can't wait to see it. We'll see though, because although it hasn't been confirmed, his money problems are definitely the problem there. So maybe he will have it. He's broke and he owes his previous attorneys over $1 million in unpaid legal bills. So he needs to raise some cash quickly or be forced to represent himself. Which he has actually stated earlier this week that he is prepared to do. And we use the term prepared very loosely because he doesn't prepare for many things very well at all. So even before that, he had issues with money. And now that this is going down further, if he represents himself, this could be an even bigger problem. Because as you know, Dominion is suing him for $1.3 billion. Smartmatic is an unspecified amount, even though they said it was around $2 billion that they lost because of his smear campaigns. So he's a little bit more about this opportunity for him to defend himself. It'll be wonderful if he does. Lindell, who's struggling financially amid this sea of legal troubles, is set to defend himself if this lawsuit taken by the companies that supplied these voting machines for that election. Now, because of this, if he gets himself out there and starts flailing and talking about the A team and the red team getting together and tell them how he's actually innocent from these things because he's proven it so many times over and over and over again, he's going to find himself losing quite quickly. There's one expert, her name is Nima Rahmani, and she's the president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers Law Firm. And here's what she said about that potential self-representation. Lindell's making a mistake, she says. He's not a lawyer and has never tried a case. Dominion's attorneys are going to run circles around him, adding the fact that he has no filter and isn't careful about what he says, which got him here in the first place. He's likely to turn off the judge and the jury. This all has the makings of a large judgment against Lindell. It's a problem because even in depositions, he's not able to really contain himself or keep his emotions in check. He said this once. He repeatedly and angrily lashed out at lawyers for former Dominion Voting Systems executive Eric Coomer in multiple depositions this year. Once over an attorney's suggestion that Lindell fielded lumpy pillow calls. And on another occasion, he called one of the lawyers an a-hole. that'll always get you somewhere. Again, David, I would like to see this trial. I'd like to see him represent himself. I'd like to see him maybe figure out what it is that's wrong with his life, but not likely.
Well, I will give him some credit. I do know a lot of lawyers who are a-holes, so I'm with him there, but that's it. I hope he does represent himself, and maybe we can get cameras in some of these lawsuits because that'll be pure entertainment. This guy is imploding before our eyes. I mentioned Donald Trump slurring in his speech. Mike Lindell seemed to be taking the same thing. Maybe it's all that ivermectin. He also seems to be slurring a little bit, and he's literally losing his mind. He lost his mind completely, of course, when he was making these ridiculous claims about the 2020 election, but now he's just he's losing it even more. And it's just in a way, it's kind of pathetic and sad because Mike Lindell actually has a pretty interesting life story of recovering from addiction, building up this business, and for him to go sort of down the way he has is pathetic. But these are the chickens coming home to roost. Justice is being served. He's going to end up costing himself a fortune. These lawsuits, he's going to end up having to pay Dominion and Smartmatic and all these systems. He's going to have to pay them a lot. And we already know his reputation has been destroyed. And $1 million in unpaid legal bills, that's a lot of money.
Maybe it's the unrelenting lib in me. But I always have like 10, 15% of sympathy for folks like this. He's been duped and he's been completely, it's like a religion. He's following this guy like he's Jesus. So because he believes Donald Trump to this degree, he's willing to completely destroy his company, his career, his second life after, as you mentioned, his drug addiction, his story. He's probably written a book about it already. But there's something you could have stopped right there. But an addict is an addict. They say this all the time. People are always recovering addicts. They're never like, oh, I can, hang out and drink another couple beers and I'll be fine. No, you have to completely go cold turkey and get rid of it. He's addicted to something else now, and it's somehow Donald Trump. Now, maybe, many former addicts become like counselors and try and help others out of the same situation they were in because I've lived it. I can tell you what it's like. Maybe after he's lost everything that he's got left, he can become a recovering MAGA counselor. I don't know. And tell people, listen, this is how I got caught up. This is how you can avoid it too, because it will destroy your life. Because that drug, Donald Trump, he will use you. And next you know, you got no teeth, no job, eyes bugging out of your head, and he will walk away laughing at you. It's very good similarities. Maybe there's some way he can find himself to cure other folks of the addiction that he's actually still addicted to.
The no teeth and the dentures, maybe that again explains the slurring. But to your point, and I don't want to get too Freudian here, but there is something very obsessive about people who are so diehard MAGA supporters. And I think there is a connection between the obsessiveness that Mike Lindell had that made him somehow a drug abuser and addiction. I think you're right, there is that sort of still personality obsession that he sort of glums onto something else. And that something else for the last several years has been Donald Trump, and Mike Lindell doesn't know how to quit. And so it feeds something in his brain whenever he attaches himself to Donald Trump in a way that was sort of, he was attached to whatever drugs he was addicted to. It's sad, and I wish there was an easy way to break people of the habit and to remind people, you were wrong about Donald Trump. It's okay to admit you were wrong and to move on.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not that bad. And sure, maybe you get some ridicule, but that's what you kind of invited. Move on and actually take the next step, and people might actually go there with you. Ted Cruz here is facing another challenge, another Democratic challenger who this time just might take him down, because we hear this every other cycle. This time, this Democratic opponent is out fundraising him already, and that's always the basis when it comes to, of course, American politics, the reasons behind someone having potential success. I hate it, but that's the way it is. Let's go to this from The Guardian. As reported by the Dallas Morning News and the Texas Tribune, the Democratic Congressman Colin Allred, Cruz's most likely opponent for re-election, reported $10.9 million raised since declaring his candidacy in May. That was nearly 20 times as much as Allred's closest Democratic rival. But it was also, the paper said, almost $2 million more than fundraising that was reported by Cruz in the same period. The hard-right Republican reportedly raised $8.8 million in the same period. Can we stop and bask in the depressive the information here that someone's raising $10.9 million in one period, Ted Cruz is raising $8.8 million in another period to run for office again and do the same things that he's been doing this whole time? Who's giving this guy money, but we already kind of know. So his spokesperson is pushing back on some of this reporting about him being out fundraised, because that's the worst thing that could ever happen to a politician. In an email to The Guardian, a spokesperson for Cruz contested these reported figures, pointing to a Fox News report earlier in October which said the senator brought in $5.4 million during the July to September third quarter of 2023 fundraising, up from the $4.4 he raised during the April to June second quarter of fundraising and the $1.8 million he brought in during the first 3 months of 2023. Okay, whatever. He brought in several millions of dollars as well too. Again, what does that translate to have to do with what you're going to do in representing the folks that are in your state? You know, when he ran off to Cancun, people gave him trouble for it. And he's like, it was just a trip. Bro, how much do you actually connect to your voters? Or is it that you're sitting back, raising money and bragging about that, and that being the only qualification that we think someone's supposed to have when it comes to being an elected official? Now back to Colin Allred. His campaign manager, Paige Hutchinson, said this about the situation. Texans' enthusiasm to retire Ted Cruz and elect Colin Allred to the Senate is reflected in this quarter's amazing outpouring of grassroots support. Let's look at where things were a little bit earlier in March of this year when Allred was expected to win that Democratic primary. And Allred is at 37% and Cruz is at 42%, gaining. And that was before all this extra haul of new money. In the meantime, you know, Ted Cruz has been running off, visiting with other folks that I completely forgot existed. One being Liz Truss. David, do you remember Liz Truss? Because it's a name I would have never thought again in my entire life until Ted Cruz went and visited her.
That sounds familiar. Remind me though, because I'm spacing.
She was around for about, I think they said 50 days as prime minister in Britain. And apparently there was a big financial issue there. I had completely forgotten about this story. And then she was kicked the hell out or resigned. Keep it that. We'll say that. She resigned. And since Ted Cruz posted this on Twitter, he said it was a real pleasure to visit with Liz Truss in Texas. She showed up there. We're so grateful for our British friends and for strong leaders on the global stage who will champion conservative principles and defend liberty. And Liz Truss was also, of course, talking about how conservatives have to win this battle in the US and the UK. The time is now. So while Ted Cruz is visiting with Liz Truss, who is known as a laughingstock, this Colin Allred, who I think is a former football player, he's gaining ground. He's at the 10. He's at the 5. He raised $20 million.
Well, first of all, I apologize to our viewers for me not knowing and not being up on my conservative British marginalized politician. So I didn't know that one. First of all, what's so interesting about Colin Allred is you're right. I'm a former football player. He has a really interesting story, very dynamic, great speaker. But I have a feeling that his ceiling is only going to get higher in terms of fundraising because a lot of the money that I think he's getting is a sort of an anti-Ted Cruz donation. There are a lot of people out there, even in Texas, who say Ted Cruz is a clown. He's a laughingstock. I keep going back to that, a couple of weeks ago when the FDA suggested, people should only have a couple of beers a day or whatever it was. And there was Ted Cruz in a bar saying, I'm going to drink as much beer as I mean, this guy is an absolute embarrassment. And so I think there are a lot of people across the country who just reflexively, I guess I'm going to give money to Ted Cruz's opponent, no matter who it is. And so there's a lot of money pouring in that way. And then, oh, by the way, when Colin Allred is actually able to sort of get out there and do more high profile interviews and establish himself a little bit more and tell more of his story, I think Colin Allred actually has a really good chance here. He's a fascinating candidate and character here. So I think he's going to have no problem raising money. And can a black man win in Texas? I'm afraid to sort of think about that. I'm not so sure yet.
It all depends. What team did he play for? You know how Americans think. Which NFL teams did Colin Allred play for? If it was some rival of any of these Texas teams, whatever, I think they're near Houston. So if he's a rival of the Texans, that powerhouse down there, then he may not have an opportunity. I'll look it up. We'll talk about it during the break because I'm out of time. But Colin Allred, if you guys do know where he played, and maybe if it's a needle in his side when it comes for this run, we'll see. But he's definitely outraised Ted Cruz as of this point, not according to the Cruz campaign. But we'll see. Let's take this next break, you guys. A few more of your comments. When we get back, there's an update about the motivations behind that terrorist who murdered that Palestinian boy and tried to kill his mother. It's one of the worst stories we've heard all year. But we'll give that update as to where his intentions came from and where they continue to be and why we need to calm the hell down. We'll do that after we talk to you. I say that all the time. I forget who it was before, and I was like, if I had all these millions of dollars, I wouldn't. Oh yeah, it was when Donald Trump was mad that he wasn't on the Forbes list anymore. And he's talking about how he has these billions of dollars, bro. If I had billions of dollars, the degree to which I couldn't care about Forbes putting me on some richest person list, I wouldn't be able to even hear it. I'd be like, Forbes? It's been a long time since I've given a damn about anybody else but me. Okay, I'm sorry. My money would go to many other places. Let's go. We've got one to get to, you guys. This series story is update about where we are as a country and where we are as a people. And it's been a quite depressing week or two. And of course, it culminates in more disasters like this. Just yesterday, we covered this story of a madman, a terrorist, a hateful person, a murderer that went and killed a 6-year-old Palestinian boy, Wadea al-Fayyoumi. Apologies as I mispronounce many names throughout this. So as we already know how tragic it was and how it culminated and came to an end, what we hadn't seen, which many I'm sure have not seen, is some of the motivations behind this attack. And they've come out that assailant's name is Joseph Suba, and he stabbed that boy to death and attempted to kill his mother as well. So here's some of those, probably, I would assume to many folks, obvious details of what was behind it. Suba, the boy's mother, told investigators, was an angry man. His wife, Mary, told investigators that he listens to conservative talk radio on a regular basis and became obsessed with the war between Hamas and Israel. So again, there's the connections that he makes don't, obviously, normal thinking people don't make these connections, but when you know folks think this way, and then you have pundits and politicians that say certain things that drive them to action behind those thoughts, maybe it's something we can pay attention to. It's why we talk about this to the degree that we do, because we know people get killed every day and there's tragic events, but when it's motivated by something like this and we know there's a connection, maybe chill the hell out. Just want to give that preface as we go through some of the things that he was talking about. So in a 45-minute detention hearing, prosecutors detailed how the crime against Shaheen and her son allegedly unfolded. So Suba's wife told detectives that he believed he was in danger, and his tenant, Shaheen, by the way, I don't know if you guys saw this yesterday, but obviously the folks that he attacked were his tenants, was going to call Palestinian friends to come and harm them. That's what he thought. They were going to call some Palestinian friends to come and harm him. Suba's wife, who wasn't home at the time of the attack, told detectives that he had withdrawn $1,000 from his bank because he believed that the grid would go down. He was also worried about the National Day of Jihad, which was supposed to be last Friday. And even though nothing happened on that day, he told his wife that he believed something would happen the next day without specifying what. Again, more parallels between the way people think, the QAnon folks and the Trump folks. If the prediction of disaster or culmination of some kind of event doesn't happen, like when JFK and JFK Jr. and Marilyn Monroe and then any other folks that have passed away showed up in Dallas for the past 7 years that they've been waiting on them. When it doesn't happen, you just go, oh, it'll probably happen the next day. Actually, what they told them was the next day, and they continue to have these following. So in this case, once the prediction of some National Day of Jihad didn't go down the way he thought it was, the only way to keep your hate flowing, because that's actually the purpose for this guy's life, the only way to keep that hate flowing is to say, let's just go ahead and postpone it to the next day so I can get my bloodthirst really pumping higher. Details about how this is not just a one-off type of event. There's been a spike in Islamophobia, according to the Council of American Islamic Relations. In a news release issued earlier this week, CARE Chicago reported a spike in hate calls, emails as a result of the violence in the Middle East. The dozens of messages that the organization received in recent days rivaled the amounts received following the September 11th terror attacks and former President Trump's travel ban targeting Muslim majority countries, according to the group. So this is what we've got. He's apparently motivated by pundits and conservative talk radio, because they've been saying things similar to what, I'm not sure if you saw this, David, that Jesse Waters then said after this horrific murder took place, which was, I don't see the difference. Jesse Waters on Fox News. I don't see the difference between Palestinians and Hamas. When I see someone that has a gun, they're Hamas. When I see them without a gun, they're still Hamas. I can't tell the difference. As you can see, the reason other countries don't let them in is because anytime one person has been let into any other country that's Palestinian, they regretted that decision. All these things just blatantly said, which would make people like this Shaheen guy go, look, Jesse Waters, who's on television, told me that if you see a Palestinian, that they're just like Hamas. Therefore, if a 6-year-old boy is at his house, I'm gonna murder him. My tenant, because he's coming to get me. Maybe that 6-year-old kid is gonna make a phone call to other Palestinians, wherever the hell they may be, and they're gonna come and kill me. So therefore, I gotta kill them first. Maybe if we think about our rhetoric and the way we talk about certain folks and seeing them as animals or less than that, maybe these things will stop happening. If the people who are saying it actually want these things to stop happening. I get the feeling that they don't, though, David.
Well, to murder, I mean, somebody in the way that, this man, murdered a 6-year-old, you have to dehumanize and say, well, this isn't a 6-year-old. This is, a certain class of people that are less than human. And how do you reach that conclusion that somebody is not worthy of humanity? Well, there are a lot of different things you take in. And one of them is, sadly, conservative media that will not make the distinction between Hamas and will not make the distinction between Hamas and Palestinians. And so as a result, they condition their audience to, as you point out, to treat all Muslims as being exactly like Hamas. Likewise, there are some people who will say that every Israeli is just like Netanyahu, who wants to bombard the Palestinians. And that's so. When we can't draw distinctions, when we can't show the complexities and take an intelligent approach in terms of how we talk about this and speak in realities about how we speak about what's going on here, then you start to take the people who are sort of maybe have a screw loose in their head or don't have the best sort of judgment or rational thinking, and they're the ones who then act on this stuff. And we have a huge population, I think, in the United States and around the world, frankly, of people who will take pieces of information and it doesn't take much to trigger them. Well, maybe there's not much we can do to try to keep these people from their violent outbursts. But at the very same time, we should at least expect our media, the voices that these people hear, to be responsible, to be respectful of humanity. And clearly that's too much to ask, particularly of, the Jesse Waters and some of the conservatives that are out there.
I wonder what the point is. Because listen, I haven't been saying much about this at all. Mostly because I think I mentioned this before, David. What is what I'm thinking about this going to do for all those children being murdered? I don't care which background, country of origin, and ethnicity that they are, religion and all that. Because rhetoric actually leads a lot of people to other actions. So when you say one thing or do things a certain way, or even the way that many leaders are doing and slanting things, whichever direction that they may slanting it, people act off of that. And do we care? I've said it also before when it comes to guns or anything else that we have, when it comes to crimes and death in this country, some folks like to go for the punitive approach and others want to prevent it. And many times the punitive approach is conservatives. It's, well, as long as, after that gunman kills 35 more people in a school, then we'll get him. How about we try to stop him from that point of killing 35 kids in their school? Preventative measures. So if we're talking about a very tense subject like this, where people are being killed indiscriminately, and you see many people seeing these videos and how horrific from either side of these attacks, people are being murdered like this. If we then go for this vengeful society that we're in and say, look at those beautiful rockets flying over innocent civilians' heads, it's going to be wonderful because I want effing revenge about what hurt me so much. Instead of thinking, how do we stop this cycle of pain? How do we stop doing this over and over and over again in many different ways? Instead, we got people who literally have said, Hamas is just like the Palestinians, and Palestinians and Hamas are just like Black Lives Matter, or just like libs here, or just like people who said and support Palestinian lives. They like to equate this, and now they're bringing it over here to have the same type of reaction and same type of end game here. So if you equate the two people that you've already said are nothing and nobodies and deserve to be dismantled and body parts flung all over the ground, if you say that and you want to bring it here, that's an intentional conversation. What is it that you're trying to get going here from your perch up at Fox News or wherever hell else you're broadcasting from? Is it chaos? Is it more death? Is it money? Do you think this is now more attention on your show? So let's just say horrific, devastatingly murderous things. I'm just trying to limit the way that I'm talking about this because, we can't.
Well, I think there's also a laziness, right? A laziness that a lot of commentators have, that it's a lot easier just to label an entire people based on one label than to express the reality that people are complex and societies are complex. If somebody had said, because in 2016, oh, shame on every American because Donald Trump, a Republican, was president of the United States, and didn't account for the fact that, no, actually more people voted against Donald Trump, we would look at those people and say, you're crazy, you're stupid to assume that all Americans agree with Donald Trump. But that's the same thing that is happening now, that there's some idea that all Palestinians support Hamas or all Israelis support the bombing of Gaza. I mean, it's stupid. And what it does is it causes misinformation, and it causes the people who are low information media consumers to then act out on some irrational thoughts that they may already have.
Sit in the middle of somewhere in Nebraska and you just have these thoughts. You think that you have it all figured out. And many of us don't. Many people in power definitely don't. That's the end of this hour, you guys. We're going to go into aftermath after this. Thank you, guys, for being on the first half. If you want to be a member, go to youtube.com/the damage report/join. Join us. See what's going on. We got more happening in the aftermath. Let's go really fast because one of my favorite stories I know is there. Super Snow White joins us in the aftermath. I can't wait to talk to her. It's going to be great. So go ahead, grab those ass cheeks. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.